so I've just got my other Miata here out of storage for the winter, and I've got a stuck brake caliper on the driver's side up front, and it was sticking a little bit last year, and I was able to remedy that by pressing the piston out and kind of cleaning it up a bit, but after sitting for 5 or 6 months in the barn, it's locked up again. So I've actually got a new remanufactured caliper here that I got at Napa. But instead of swapping out the whole caliper, I'm going to take all the components from this one and put them into this one, since these are painted, and this way I won't have to deal with painting the new caliper I got, and I'll just swap in all the hardware and the piston and the seals and everything. You can see that's spatter from the brake pads. It was sticking so bad. So I'm gonna jack it up, get this tire off, and start removing that caliper. All right, that took a little persuading with the hammer, but that's just because my caliper's locked up. So with that 14 millimeter out, swings up like this and slides out, and we'll set it up there so there's no stress on the brake line. All right, so I'm going to detach the brake line now. It's a 12 millimeter bolt right there. And then to close it off, when the banjo bolt's taken out, I just got a pair of vice grips, and I put some foamies in there. And so I will clamp that on like that. All right, so I've got that capped off. It really won't leak too much fluid as long as you've got the cap still on your reservoir. So now I can take this caliper out, slide it out, and next I'm going to drain what I can of the fluid out of it, and then we're going to pop the piston out. So the easiest way I found to get the piston out is with some compressed air, and just blow it into the hole where the banjo bolt went through. Well, that's clearly not going to work. Yeah. All right, so this piston didn't want to play nice. Wasn't able to pop it out with air. I popped the one out of the refurbished caliper very easily, just one little and it was right out. So I put this back on the car, hooked up the brake line, forced the piston out as much as I could without it blowing out and leaking fluid everywhere, and that's enough for me to fit a little chisel. Should be able to pop it out now. There we are. And that's why my caliper was locking up probably. This piston is just, you know, getting corrosion on it, causing it to lock up. So, alright, I got the piston out. I am now going to remove all the seals from this and get this cleaned up. With brake parts cleaner, you don't want anything in there at all. That needs to be super clean. So there's 2 seals. This main one here, and then way down in the bottom is a ring-shaped one. So I'm going to take those out. Try and get this bolt out, and I'll be ready to start swapping the new parts in. So my mistake. That second seal's not down along the bottom. It's this rubber one here. So this top bolt was a wicked bitch to get out. So you see I put the caliper here in the vise, and with the hammer able to get that out. So I'm happy about that. Alright, so I got the inside of my caliper all cleaned up. I took off this first seal, and now that one around in there. I'm just going to pry that out with this little pin and swap them over, slide the piston back in. I've also got a syringe here with fresh brake fluid in it. To make sure the seals are nice and lubricated and around inside the caliper. Alright, so I got the piston in there with that first inner seal. I tried to put this seal on and then put the piston in, but it's pretty much impossible to get it to go through here. So easier just to put this one on after the piston's in. Next step just involves switching over these little bushings over to your other carrier. And this one up here just pops off and slips on the lip over that. This one actually runs through the carrier, and you can see the one I had on there is ripped pretty bad, missing a good portion of it. So this one's greased up pretty good, so you can grab it from this end and pretty much pull it out without any tools or anything. And we'll slide it back through in this one. Alright, so I have those bushings swapped over onto my carrier, reattached the clips for the pads. I did swap this bleeder screw out too, just so everything's new. So I'm going to put the carrier back on. I can start putting stuff back together. Alright, so that caliper is all cleaned up, rebuilt, reinstalled. And normally if you're just doing one caliper like that, you could just bleed this one caliper. I'm going to bleed my whole system because when I took this off and dumped the fluid out of the caliper, it's like pretty dirty, and brake fluid is actually hydroscopic, which means it absorbs water over time. So I'm going to go ahead and do all four corners of the car, and I'm going to start on the corner that's furthest away from the brake booster, which would be my passenger side right tire, rear tire, sorry, and then the other rear, and then this corner and this corner. I've heard the debates over whether you have to start at the caliper furthest away from the brake booster, and I've heard people say it doesn't make a fucking difference. So I'm just gonna follow that little rule of thumb. Alright, so this is my little bleeder bottle. It's just 1/4 inch tubing. I got about 3 feet of it, and I ran it down into the bottom of the bottle, and I've got it taped there around the top just to make sure it doesn't slip out. And what I'm going to do is take as much brake fluid as I can out of the reservoir using this little syringe. You can see this brake fluid's pretty discolored. Usually it's almost totally clear. It's got a little bit of a yellowish tint. So that's why I'm bleeding all this out, flushing the system. And what I'm taking out, I'm putting into my little bottle here so that the bottom of the hose will be submerged in brake fluid. Alright, so there's some old cucky brake fluid there. And I'm going to pour some fresh fluid into the reservoir. And as I'm bleeding it through, I'll be able to see that color change, hopefully. And I'll be able to tell that clean fluid is run all the way through each line. You can actually see the color difference here. Down in the bottom is the old brake fluid, and this cleaner brake fluid on top. And I poured it in pretty slowly just to make sure it didn't mix too much, so that I have that definite color difference. And I've just got the cap set on there. It's not tightened down. I've got it filled up to the full mark. You want to make sure it doesn't get down too low as you're flushing everything out, because then you'll just suck more air into the system. So I'm going to go slide this over the bleeder on the right rear caliper and start bleeding the brakes. So I got my bottle here. I do not have a box-ended wrench or a flare wrench, which is probably a good idea for loosening your bleeder screw. You don't want to strip it, so I just gently broke the torque on it with a 6-point socket, and then from there I can loosen it with this adjustable wrench. So I'm going to slip the end of this tubing over the bleeder. So I'm going to go ahead and crack the bleeder open, and I think gravity should start forcing brake fluid through that line. Alright, so nothing coming through. Oh wait, there it goes. Ooh, it's starting. Alright, so I stepped on the brake a couple times just to force some fluid through the line. I also forgot on that corner that piston was fully retracted, so it would have needed a little bit of fluid to flow in and get that piston snug. Alright, so I see a definite color change. This is almost perfectly clear, like nice fresh brake fluid. And here's this old scuzzy stuff. This was everything that was flushed out of the master cylinder, basically. Alright, so my bleeder is tightened down. I'm just going to pinch the line with my vice grips here, just so a bunch of fluid doesn't come squirting out. And I can pull the hose off, and I'll tighten it, torque it just with the 6-point socket there. All right, yeah, it's coming through. This side's a little bit easier because I can just push the pedal down with my hand and wash the fluid over here. So I'm going to see if I can catch that color change in the fluid a little bit better. I think last time I completely filled the hose up with fresh fluid. looks pretty clear. I don't think it's going to get any clearer than that. So I've been able to get any fluid to come out of this caliper, and I think it's because the bleeder's clogged. I took it all the way out and brake fluid started coming out of the caliper. So I think the bleeder is just corroded or plugged up, got some dirt or scrunged in there or something. So luckily I still got the bleeder from my other caliper. I changed that one out with a new bleeder screw from the remanufactured caliper I got. So I'm going to put this one on here and try bleeding it. Yeah, look how nasty that fluid is in there. That's quite a bit of rust in there. So I imagine that's why this bleeder was plugged up. Quite a lot of rust right there. So that's pretty nasty. So I imagine this caliper might not be far behind from that one. So I'm going to get a rebuild kit. Redo this one too. That's pretty clean, right? I'll give her one more squirt. You can definitely tell that that one had air in it. So normally after completing a job like this and fixing my brakes, flushing the system, I take the car for a ride and see how they felt, but I can't do that because it's mud season in Maine and my driveway's kind of a fucking death trap right now. So I'm gonna have to wait a few days on that. So I'm all done. Reservoir is topped off. I just coiled up my tubing inside of the bottle there until I need to use this again, or until I find somewhere to dispose of this brake fluid properly. But look at all that gunk that was in there. It's a lot of rust, corrosion. And like I said, brake fluid is hydroscopic, so it does absorb water over time and it can cause components to rust. That's probably why my piston was rusted here initially, you know. So I'm glad I got that done. I only used about half of this jug. And another thing I've heard is not really to buy more brake fluid than you need. Because this jug of brake fluid sitting in my garage could absorb water just the same as the brake fluid can in your car's brake system. So next time I'll probably get a slightly smaller jug of it. I'd rather have a little bit more than I need than not have enough though. So there you have it. How to rebuild your caliper and flush your brakes.